Hello, and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm your host, Valerie King, R&R's editor-in-chief, and I'm joined today by Ryan Pritchard, sales manager of CanAm Systems. Now, CanAm Systems provides integrated restoration management software that's designed to help restoration companies increase efficiency, accountability, and ultimately profits. So, CanAm Systems, it launched in 1994 with a solution focused on accounting, but it's evolved to provide much more, including job management, estimating, scheduling, marketing, and equipment tracking. The list goes on, but that's to name a few. Now, proven software applications, which you may have heard of and know as PSA by CanAm Systems, prides itself on being an integrated solution, an ERP that brings several software solutions and names together for a one stop experience. And the company recently announced a rebrand. That's with the start of this new year, 2022. So we invited Ryan on to share more about what's new with CanAm and more broadly the state of software as he sees it within the restoration industry. Plus, of course, practical tips contractors can take to ensure the software they invest in actually delivers value. So I really appreciate you joining me, Ryan. Thanks for being here.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, Valerie. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Looking forward to it. Okay, so to set the stage, deeper dive than what I offered, can you paint a more detailed picture of the evolution of CanAm systems, growing from, like I said, an accounting solution to so much more? Why'd this happen? How'd this happen?
So again, you touched on it in the introduction about, we started back in 1994 as an accounting software vendor. At that point, we were working with a number of different verticals in Canada, offering, service and repair, sports club management, mental health. And it was around, 2002 that we were approached by a consulting group in the restoration space that said, hey, we really like your job costing module, and we're struggling on the contractor side to keep track of all of our committed costs. We think this would be a good fit, for what we're looking for. So we were like, perfect. When we jumped into this space, there was really only a couple of key players, which at the time were Exactware, that did and handled the estimating and scoping side, and JPP, who was the job management system at the time. And so we kind of formed like this trifecta partnership that allowed us to handle the accounting and job costing. JPP handled the job management, and Xactimate handled the estimating and scoping. And so around 2003, 2004, JPP fell out, and we kind of filled in the gap there for job management. We built that system out to be more than just a job costing tool, but a workflow management tool, being able to capture, documents, pictures, time cards, to really help the contractor organize their information better on the claim side, and then have that naturally just flow into the accounting side.
Okay, really helpful answer, which perfectly segues into the present. So, curious, what does this all look like today? I, of course, mentioned ERP is something you pride yourselves on. So, what does ERP mean, and how does such a model serve restoration clients and companies?
So for those of you that are going to Google what ERP means, it's basically an enterprise resource planning tool, and they shortened it to ERP. In essence, there's a lot of industries out there that are trying to find technologies that encompass all the different areas of their business. And so basically what ERP stands for is it's a software tool that will give that industry all the components they need into a single solution. And so in restoration, one of the things that we identified kind of early on was this disconnect of information. We like to call it like information silos. And so you had your finance department who was running off their own system independent of our production teams. So there was no communication back and forth as to spending, invoicing, payments. And so it leads to breakdowns in communication. And so now you have these two departments fighting to get information back and forth. And then recently, a couple years ago, we launched the CRM side because there's been a big push in this industry for sales and marketing, and how we set our business up for growth and scaling. And so again, this was an area where we had contractors who were using tools separate from production. So I'm trying to manage a pipeline of leads that don't communicate with the job opportunities that we're working on. So I have no visibility to know who our top generators are. And so by connecting some of these dots, what we provide is transparency between these different departments that really allow contractors to get a pulse on where all of these different departments or divisions stand within their business. And so that's kind of been our philosophy to say there are tools out there that you absolutely have to use. From an estimating side, you got your core logics and your exactimates that really help contractors build their scopes and estimates. You got mitigation tools out there like the encircle hydros and the micas that kind of help, manage that drying process. And then, of course, there's the claim side of things where you have contractors and carriers communicating through services like Exact Analysis and Claim Connect. And statistically, a lot of these pieces, again, were disconnected. So, from an ERP perspective, it wasn't just about redesigning all of these tools, it's about connecting into the ecosystem of all of these core products so that the contractor doesn't have to scale up their admin staff just to keep up with the demand of information. And so, in essence, what PSA, our philosophy has always been, is providing a connected ecosystem for the contractor to manage, organize, and efficiently send information to where it needs to go without having someone physically there to re-enter it or rekey it from one side to another.
Very colorful, well versed. You're kind of pointing at a pain point, which is not having necessarily as much integration as is desired and brings efficiency. So that leads me right into my next question, tied to challenges in the broader restoration industry. I've said it millions of times, but it's the top challenge as the R&R 2021 State of the Industry report points to adoption of technology. And so I'm wondering if the finding, sorry, not the top challenge, a top five challenge, um, does that finding align with what you're seeing in your business among clients, tech adoption being a top challenge?
I mean, definitely. I think, this hasn't really been a new problem. I think it's always been a problem. And I think it's kind of had its light shone on it a lot brighter simply because the other challenge that I think contractors are having in this industry is just finding staff that they can hang on to, that they can train, that they can certify. And so by not having consistency in staff and having a turnover of a lot of our key people, adding technology into that equation is much more difficult. And I think, part of the challenge is that, when we look at this industry made up of these tradespeople and contractors, they're very highly skilled in, building things and in the processes of things, but may not be super tech savvy from a standpoint of being able to manage information. And that's something that, and it's not a negative, it's just from a standpoint of really understanding the why of, how does this benefit me? Why do I need to put all this information into this system, right? What do I need to meet a certain requirement or compliance? And it's really trying to get that why across to embrace that technology. I think it's a struggle for a lot of people. And I'm not just saying at the technician level, but for all positions of a business to be challenged that they're so busy right now that they're running around dealing with all of these things in an emergency environment, and then having to stop and make sure that everything they're doing is methodically recorded, and every date and conversation and text message and email gets logged. It's a lot to ask of any person, let alone any industry. And so I think it's a challenge that in conjunction with the difficulty to find good people, it's just amplified this inability to really leverage the technology that's out there and understand how that's going to benefit them as a company.
Thank you. Okay, layering on to that, what are some of the top challenges that you and your work see clients and prospects facing when it comes to software solutions? Are there certain, common questions you hear from restorers, for example?
So again, I touched on this briefly in the last comment about the understanding the why. I think with technology, the premise that a lot of people miss is that technology, no matter how sophisticated, great, automated that it is, it's still based on a platform of entry of information to some degree. Yes, you can automate where we pull things from. Yes, you can automate where to send things. But at the end of the day, a lot of that data is entered by somebody. And the important part is really providing the understanding of why that information is important to the end user who has to put that information in. Because they're looking at it as just another thing they have to do in their already slam day of trying to keep up with customer satisfaction, manage their costs, being able to keep track of, teams of production people, managing salespeople that are going out on the road that never step foot in the office. And so the challenge is, how is all of these technology pieces going to benefit me in the end? Is it going to make my life easier? Is it going to provide me more time and understanding of what is actually going on in the business? And so trying to get over that hurdle of the why, I think, is something that gets neglected in a lot of transitions. When a company makes a decision, they're making it on the premise that everything I saw looks fantastic. You go to see a demonstration of a software, everything runs smoothly. The reports are, immaculate. But what they don't understand is that that report is only that way because somebody took the effort to put all that information in, and it's managed, from a standpoint of consistency and processes. And so on top of the why, the other challenge I think contractors have is they understand that they have a pain or a gap in their process, and they feel like the technology will just patch that problem. But it's more of an underlying processes standpoint of knowing, well, who's accountable for doing this? Who's responsible for managing that piece of information? And if we just overlay that technology on top of a problem, it doesn't actually solve it. It just amplifies the fact that there is a problem that we need to fix that's more underlying.
Really helpful there. Underlying problems, the people component of software, communication, getting adoption, really making the case for all those folks who work for the organization and should be making the technology do what you paid for it to do.
Yep.
Um, that leads into my next question. Any additional practical tips regarding successful technology adoption? I know in a past chat when we were meeting each other, you shared kind of like some principles you've come up with for ensuring software investments reap ROI. So, can you share some of the keys to selecting and integrating new software?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple of steps that we try and take our existing clients and potential clients through in evaluating technology. And it really starts at the very forefront of what are the goals of the organization? Because before we can determine what technology we need to use, we need to understand, what are we hoping to achieve? What's that roadmap of the growth of the company, of the structure of the people that we are employing, their accountability. So it's building that foundation on the organization side for, here's what we want as a company to achieve. Technology aside, just what is our vision? What are our goals? Then the next thing that we look at once we've identified that foundation is really understanding, what are the things that we need to have in place more from a process and behavior standpoint to make it to those goals. What is the plan, that we're going to need to achieve those? And once that structure and plan is in place, you then seek out the technology that helps achieve that plan. So how do we make this process more efficient? How do we hold our people more accountable to these behaviors? We use technology as a tool to assist us in that overall plan. It isn't the plan itself, it's the tool that we provide, much like a hammer that we use to nail into a board. It's merely a tool that we use to get to that end result. And so without those two first steps, you're going to struggle not only with the understanding of the why, you're going to struggle with trying to get your team to embrace this technology, because they don't fully see that vision and they don't know what their responsibilities and accountabilities are before they're being forced to use this tool, so to speak. And so I feel like, even before technology comes into play, there's a lot of internal discussions and internal investigation that needs to happen before that technology even becomes the discussion point. And I think that companies that invest that time in that planning and that discussion stage have much better success in implementing the technology once they get to that piece.
This is really helpful. So I'm wondering, obviously, restoration company business models, sizes run the gamut. I'm wondering if you found that the same principles apply for small, medium, large, franchise, independence. What's your take there? Any nuances we should note here?
Again, from a standpoint of what we talked about, that software is ultimately a resource that's run by physical people. And so when you look at the factor of a size of a company, the reason that our ERP system is sold in modules is that not every company can jump in with all pieces ready to go because they don't have the people to run those aspects of the system. And so we see this progression of a company from a startup to, roughly 1.5 million, kind of getting their foundation set up, getting those people in place to really start to manage, embracing that technology. Once you've kind of broken through that barrier, adding on to the pieces or understanding of that technology, I think, is important as you scale, because there are, like I said, there are so many different aspects of a business that need to have the proper tools for them to be efficient. That when you look at, like, does this business have a sales department? Do they have dedicated salespeople? Well, if I don't, why am I embracing or trying to implement a CRM? It doesn't make sense. It ends up collecting dust, and then we don't see the value in it because nobody's managing it. And so I think that, from a technology perspective, everyone's eager to kind of get that technology because they understand that this will make us better, but then they struggle with the ability to actually use it. And ultimately it falls off because there wasn't that foundation in place before they embraced that technology. And so, from our philosophy, I think an important part as a technology professional is that we also have to do a better job of educating contractors as to, here are the components that you need to make this successful. I don't want to sell you something that's going to fail. It's in my best interest to make these contractors succeed. And I want to make sure that I give them all the proper tools that they need to do so. But I also need that business to kind of meet us halfway to make sure that there's a commitment to using that technology, and that there's an accountability in place to making that functionality work. Otherwise it's basically like having a race car without an engine, right? It looks great on the outside, but it can't go anywhere. And that's all because it requires all of those pieces internally to function the way it's intended.
Thanks for homing in on this broader ecosystem, the truly holistic lens where we should be looking at these technology solutions through before we invest in them and as we put them to work. I'm wondering if there are any other pieces of advice you might offer. You talked about kind of scaling, technology as business is scaled. You alluded to modules that you offer. Any more there you want to weigh in on when it comes to really growing your tech solutions with your restoration business?
So recently, one of the pieces that we added was the customer facing piece, because throughout the progression of PSA, we focused on the finance side. So a business needs to make money to grow. And so that was kind of our foundational piece. Then the planning tools, like how do we manage a project? How do we scale our sales pipeline? Those came in naturally with the job management and CRM. And so now the struggle, certainly the pandemic pushed this a lot harder, from a standpoint of how we interact with a customer. These days it went from being a very personal business model where we're face to face, we're talking, we're shaking hands. It was a big aspect of the restoration industry that a lot of this, both customer facing from a standpoint of like a policyholder or an agent, an adjuster, was very in person kind of relationship building. And what the pandemic has kind of done is it's kind of flipped that on its side, and now a lot of things are virtual, right? So we're servicing the customer virtually. And the generational switch that we've kind of seen technology wise is that customers, don't want to log in to a portal. They don't want to have to, fight for that information. it's almost like what we call like the TikTok generation of information, where they just need the details that are important to them, and they need it in 15 seconds or less. And so this shift, certainly from the technology side, is how do we embrace that customer experience, keeping that customer in the loop and allowing them to be constantly updated through technology that puts less of an emphasis on somebody picking up the phone and calling that person or trying to get a hold of them via email. And so this shift that we're seeing, certainly on the technology side, is really about embracing that customer experience and automation to really hone in on an area that I think is becoming another big challenge for contractors, which is keeping up with customer expectations, making sure the customer is satisfied, being able to get information back, in real time, to know that if something went wrong, if there's a challenge, that it's forward facing, that we can see these things and get in front of it, because we're dealing with an industry that's naturally reactive by nature. We're dealing with emergencies. So these are things that happen unexpectedly. And we're trying to approach them from a standpoint of being proactive. I want to be in front of the questions, in front of the challenges, so that we can make sure that that customer who's going through a very difficult time right now feels like they're being taken care of, and that we are constantly keeping them updated. And I think that's something that technology does very well, again, if used properly.
Again, very helpful, tying it into that end customer and their journey and experience. Now, I'd love to focus on CanAm Systems and really what's new with you. I talked about the rebrand very briefly in the intro. So, what's going on? Can you elaborate on that recent rebrand and more? What any upcoming launches or developments in 2022 we should keep our ears and eyes out for?
So again, the whole principle of the rebrand was that when we started building the initial accounting system, PSA stood for Proven Solutions Accounting, and so that's kind of how the industry saw us. Oh, they're just an accounting solution. I need all these other pieces. And so the idea that over time, as we started adding on to these different modules, it was more than just accounting. And so we rebranded as Proven Software Applications to let people know that we are a full, completely integrated solution. And that when you sign up with PSA, it's a solution that grows with your business and all aspects of it. And so our intention, again, the big shift that we had with this rebrand, is really providing a solution that's 100% cloud-based. Because again, this challenge with the pandemic, where we have people working from home remotely, they're on their phones, they're using tablets, they're not in an office all the time. They're not in an area where they can collaborate easily with their peers. And so by having a solution that's 100% web-based, it opens up the possibilities for more collaboration. It opens up this idea of really having a real-time funnel of information, because when we connect into the ecosystem, we're not just capturing the information that your office is managing, we're getting information from the carriers and TPAs that are feeding in and updating your jobs. We're getting information from the field staff who are working on site, spending money, building things, tracking equipment, their time. All of this allows us to put a stance of managing proactively from a standpoint of that information, and really honing in on what's going on right now. And I think that's an important philosophy for technology providers out there, that, there's a lot of great tools that are in the market, but if that tool doesn't connect to anything, or that tool is just a standalone piece, what we're asking contractors to do is go back to that idea of managing separate spreadsheets and sticky notes, where somebody's physically having to take that information and move it from one place to another. And so our projection is that all of these components in 2022 are going to be accessible. They're going to be web-based. They're bolt-on, so you can start with the job management system and add the CRM, or you can start with the accounting and build into the job management side. We wanted to make it flexible so that the needs of the business could be met first, and that the tool would adapt to the needs of the business. And so, just in November, we launched Proven Onsite, which, was a huge piece for us for the customer experience and forward facing. For announcements that we have for integrated partners, we announced our integration to CoreLogic's Symbility. That was a big piece for us to kind of tie into that side of the ecosystem. We have many integrated partners that we're adding, this year, and although we can't announce all of them at this moment in time, you will see those announcements coming shortly in the summer. And our philosophy has always been one of being open to integrating, being open to connecting to the ecosystem. And we feel that the contractor should have the right to choose, what pieces are going to be the best fit for their business. And so that's really been our prerogative in this industry, to make sure that we provide solutions that are flexible and that will meet the needs, of the contractor, so that they're not forced to have to duplicate or triplicate information, in their companies.
Really helpful. It all points back to the points you've made throughout this interview and being in touch with the needs of the business, the people who make it up, the customers, even that TikTok generation you talked about. Like all of us are getting this shorter attention span. So even as I'm putting the software to work, I'm like, okay, hurry up, come
Yep.
on. So very helpful. Okay, so you talked about projections for CanAm Systems this year. Wondering if you have any thoughts or expectations for the future of software in the restoration industry overall? Any key trends that come to mind or predictions in your head?
I mean, the shift right now, which I'm very excited about, is this ability for vendors to work more closely together. I feel I've been in the industry for over 11 years now, and when I started, everything was very disconnected. From a standpoint of vendors collaborating and working together, and so it really stifled innovation, on the technology space, because at heart, technology's there to innovate. It's there to solve problems, and if it can't eliminate that ability to streamline that information, it almost defeats the purpose of what it's in place for. And so this shift of now seeing vendors more open to collaborating together in this space is exciting. Seeing the idea of having more competition out there in different areas, whether that's mitigation tracking or estimating or equipment tracking, gives the end user the ability to choose, which I think is important, for technology, because not every company has the same needs and wants. And so I feel like, if you force everyone to use the same tool, or if you force everyone into a specific path, you're not going to get 100% success ratio. And so by having choice, by having the freedom to choose, the best in breed for what's a good fit for your company, I think is important. And I think that will lead to innovation. I think that will lead to a lot of exciting changes, in this space, that are going to help both contractors and carriers alike, work closely together and provide at the end the information that the customer needs, to feel like they're included, they're in the loop, and just making it a better experience, I think, for all parties.
Very good. This has been a really awesome interview. Anything else you'd like to add before we tie things up?
I think, from my perspective, we're always looking for that next big challenge. And so I know we talked about this before we started the podcast, but really excited, I think, to get back out there. I know everybody's listening, eager to get, back into trade shows, to get back into networking, because I feel like what this industry has always done very well is create strong relationships, and the social component of it, I think, is very important for growth. And so, just very happy to kind of get back to a sense of normalcy as we move forward into 2022.
Great note to end on. I feel like that just brings to life another theme that you kept bringing up throughout, which is really the significance of that human factor in all of this. We're here to talk about digitization and software, but that foundation of the people behind it and who use it. So thank you so much, Ryan. It's been great. Before we go, where can listeners go to connect with you or learn more about CanAm Systems?
So probably the best place is to find us on our website, basically www.canamsys.com. You'll find all of our social media pages there, from LinkedIn to Twitter and Facebook. So we have a big social media presence. And of course, we encourage customers to reach out to us on our toll-free lines or by email for more information, or what I like to call a free 30-minute consult to kind of get education on technology and what we have to offer.
Awesome. Thank you again, Ryan.
Thank you, Valerie, for having me. I really appreciate it. I thought the interview was fantastic.
Could not agree more. All right, listeners and viewers, for more insights on restoration, remediation, and the people behind it all, visit our website, randrmagonline.com, also Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you haven't yet, please be sure to follow the podcast, and that's how you'll keep up with all of our latest episodes as they roll out. If you could give us a quick review and rating, even better, we would so appreciate it. We're also on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, so we invite you to follow us on social too. This has been R&R's Ask the Expert. Thank you, as always, for listening.